Resume and start the program. 2020 Tokyo, Path Towards Sustainable Urban Development. We are to have a panel discussion. Before the discussion, we'd like to have individual presentations by the speakers. Let me introduce the moderator, Executive Director of JREF, Mr. Teruyuki Ono.
皆さんこんにちは、大野です。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
私はモデレーターという役なので、ごく簡単にお話をしたいと思います。イントロなのでですね、今日持続可能なオリンピックというテーマでもうすでに瀬尾さんからもお話がありましたが、
Sustainable Olympics and Mr. Sueyoshi spoke and why we chose this theme of sustainability. I'd like to reflect on this process of how we ended up choosing sustainability. There has been strong criticism that the Olympic Games leads to destruction of the environment, especially the Tokyo Olympic Games. We will be building facilities where nature is very rich, and this will lead to destruction. In the 70s, in Colorado, in Denver, they decided not to have the Olympics, even though they were chosen. And what was a problem in terms of environmental destruction was the Albertville Olympic Games. And here, I will not go into detail, but whether it's disposal of waste or the treatment of the River Rhone, there was a lot of destruction. It became a major issue. So this is why environment became a major consideration in connection with the Olympic Games. And another point which was mentioned by Mr. Sueyoshi, the world as a whole has to protect the world's environment. And that was another theme and issue. And so based on this background, in 1992, in Rio, when the World Summit took place, the stakeholders of the Olympic Games gathered, and they issued the Earth Pledge in 1994. In commemoration of the 100th year of the Olympic Games, the Olympic Congress adopted a statement which said that the environment was a major pillar of the Olympic Games, and the IOC major policies since the 1990s or within 20 years, sustainability was positioned as a major theme in the Olympic Games. But just positioning this as a theme does not lead to the realization of sustainability. On a full scale, sustainability became a major pillar in the past two Olympics. 1994 Lillehammer Olympic Games was one in which sustainability became a major theme. And the Sydney Olympics was another game in which this became a major theme. So these two Olympic Games were such that it wasn't the IOC speaking. The local businesses, environmental NGOs spoke up, so that prevention of the destruction of the environment became a major theme in the Olympic Games. And based on this major flow, the Sustainable Olympic Games really materialized in 2012 Olympic Games in London. And I have been working in the present foundation, which I work for. But before I was working for the Tokyo Metropolitan government. And one of the work I was doing related to the Olympic bid. And when we make a bid, we create a bid file, and we commit to doing certain things. And to create the environment portion of this was my job. Tokyo made the bid in 2006 toward hosting the Olympic Games in 2016. 2006. 2005 was when it was decided that the Olympic Games would go to London. And so we learned a great deal from London. And then based on that, in 2016, with regard to the bid we made, we learned we leveraged what we learned from London, and we created the file in 2016. And there were three major pillars there: minimizing the environmental impact, the world's first carbon minus. We say carbon neutral, but we said that we would realize the first carbon minus, and regenerating the city environment in symbiosis with the nature, and creating a society which is sustainable through sports. And that was the theme of the bid file. The 2020 was the year for which we made the bid, and the bid was pretty much the same. The bid file was pretty much the same as what we created before, and I'd like to refer to the details later on in the discussions. What I'd like to add is that in relation to the Olympic Games and sustainability, one major change took place. Well, first we discussed the environmental destruction of the Olympics, how to control the negative impact of the Olympic Games. That was the major thrust. Well, of course, there's some of that today, but at the same time, using the Olympic Games as a catalyst so that the city and the regions and the nation can be changed. We are broadening our perspective, and that is the change we are seeing. And so this is the context against which we are preparing for the Olympic Games in 2020. Thank you very much for your kind attention. The speaker was being very modest, but when you say the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, it's most advanced in Japan in terms of environmental policies, and Mr. Ono was taking the lead in this, and the environmental portion of the bid file was created mainly by the speaker, so he's most appropriate to be participating in our discussions. And another person, we have other persons who have made great contributions to the bid. Now we have Chairman of the Mizuno Corporation and the past CEO of Tokyo 2020 Bid Committee, Mr. Masato Mizuno, who will be speaking. Mr. Mizuno, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, I am Mizuno. Until now, everybody has talked about something. That is to say that what is the significance of hosting Olympic Games? There are 2 points. One, naturally, we want to have a game, 21st century type, creative games. Dream, hopes, and personal excitement could be shared with the people of the world. We want to have the delivery of the smooth game in that way. Of course, this is very important. But the remaining 50% is legacy, as you discussed. Beyond 2020, what kind of wonderful society can we, healthy society, ethical society, how can we create such a society? So, in terms of legacy, there are 2 factors. The first one is tangible legacy, tangible, that you can see. And another thing is intangible legacy. Tangible legacies, sports facilities, in the case of TMG, there is a sufficient level of infrastructure, so we don't have to create new railways or new roads. There is no need for that. But power has to be generated, telecommunication facilities will have to be introduced, so some level of infrastructure is necessary. But beyond that, how can these could be put to good use? It's very important, especially in the case of sports facilities. White elephant is an English expression. You build something big, but afterwards it's not used. Then it goes like a white elephant. It's dead. So you have to prepare very good, and multi-use has to be considered. It doesn't have to be used for a sports event. It can be used for cultural events. So you have to prepare for them too. What about intangible legacy? This is very important again. Intangible, no form. Roughly speaking, culture, education, and environment. International exchange, volunteerism, tourism, and new combination thereof, new business. Those would be regarded as intangible legacy. Earlier on, it was said that culture has to be regarded important. So cultural program is placed in the candidature file. Theater City Tokyo was the expression used. Tokyo itself would turn to a theater. so that we can have cultural programs. At the time of the Olympic Games, we will have the theater, but it was only the beginning. Even beyond the 2020, cultural programs have to continue. This is very important. Education. Earlier on, we said that we have to consider good Olympic Games. But currently, what children need is power to think. The teachers shouldn't teach. Teacher should make children think for themselves. Thereby, the problem-solving capability would be nurtured. So, in a way, we will work together, we will think together. It's not something that we do because we are imposed to do, we are told to do. We move because of our own volition. We have to equip ourselves with the ability to do. The third point is the environment. That's going to be the theme of the panel discussion, so I will not say much about it. Intangible legacy. So, that is something that we will have to live with beyond 2020. What kind of society we want to create? So the basis for that is the intangible legacy. Good suggestions were made by Professor Yamamoto. Ethical Olympic Games. I think that was the buzzword he gave to us. And it was a sort of a scale coming off my eyes. It's not that my eyes are turning to scales. No, scales have come off my eyes. So, in that sense, all-inclusive topic is ethical Olympic Games. I know that time is running short. When we bid for 2016 Games, Evaluation Commission comes. So to the Evaluation Commission, we had to offer various explanations. They were led to site tours and Q&A sessions. And then afterwards, I have lots of friends in IOC. So I asked them, what about it? What did you feel? How did you feel about Tokyo's presentation? They said, Tokyo, it was like silo. It was like a silo. What is silo? I asked. Then it is a silo containing hay and corn and wheat. It is the vertically compartmentalized administration. Every section has talked about its own section, but there is no horizontal collaboration. Synergy effect was not something that they felt out of the presentation. They couldn't feel the lateral collaboration. That was a great lesson. So in the case of bid for 2020, we had the overarching, comprehensive, holistic thinking. On the question of environment, this comprehensiveness is going to be very important. Environment is not something only about environment, especially 52 functional areas, opening ceremonies, Olympic Village, and all other functions exist in Olympic Games. So Olympic Games are to be delivered in 52 functions. So 52 functional areas. Environment is related to all areas. And in all areas, environmental policies and policies have to be implemented. Shaun said earlier on, London Games was big. And from sideways, there are many interventions would come. Many entities would come. And that is what is required of comprehensiveness, especially in the case of environment. Mr. Sueyoshi said, IPCC report, if you read it, we know that there's no time left for the Earth. So Olympic Games could be the trigger that would make people be aware of the environment. So we have to prepare in that regard. That is how I am thinking about the preparation at IOC. From 1995, I have become the member of the Committee on Sports and Environment. From the very beginning, we said 2 points. Our mission is twofold. First one, awareness. Enlightenment activities to create awareness. Another point is implementation, that is the actual activities. These two are very important. The most important is awareness program out of the two. We have to make people be aware of the programs. If you don't know, it's so innocent. oh, okay, there's no time available for Earth, but you are innocent about it. So we have to know the reality. Then what should we do? What should be the objective? Or what should be the preparation to act against that, against the eventuality? By doing so, come 2020, it's a one fantastic opportunity for us. So we want to showcase what we can do in Tokyo 2020. We want to be the model of the world, giving a favorable impact to the world so that people of the world can be aware of the situation. Professor Yamamoto said that we lack awareness. Indeed. We have to be ambitious. We have to be aware, triggered by the Olympic Games. Olympic Games is an opportunity. Shaun said that a lot of energy is going to be spent for Olympic Games, no matter what you do. So sustainable Olympic Games is something that we consider, but there is no such thing as a sustainable Olympic Games. Now then, what is the trade-off? By doing this big thing, everybody will be more aware of the environmental situation. If we can do that, there is a value in doing so. So let us cooperate with each other so that 2020 would be a fantastic year for the cause of environment, making people be aware of the environment. I sincerely hope for the great impact coming from the Olympic Games. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's very befitting of the person who has brought the Olympic Games to Tokyo. Next, we have from Waseda University, from the Architectural Department, we have Professor Tsutsui Ryuji, or rather Professor Shinichi Tanabe from the Faculty of Science and Engineering of Waseda University. With regard to the architectural facilities, hot Olympics to be made cool through Japan's traditional technology. That is what this talk will be about. I'm in the architecture department, so when it comes to Olympic-related facilities, its design and its construction and related city planning is something that people who are concerned have been involved in. My students of my research department worked in a company, and they were involved in the Olympic Games, and they looked a little tired, and they're very busy, and the cost is very high. The delivery date is such that they're very strict about it, and they couldn't even talk to me about it. In 1964, in the Olympic Games, those seniors who have worked, they created the buildings, and they talk about with much confidence that they created outstanding facilities, and they engaged in city planning in the Koshu main road highway. The trees have been planted, and the trees are living even to this day. And we use energy by providing architectural facilities. But if we have a vision, we could say that we want to work hard for the Olympic Games and the Olympic movement. To Professor Kobayashi at Keio and Mr. Ono is supporting us in many ways, and you have the English version in your hands. We have put in your hands the recommendation on architectural facilities, and to talk about this, and I could go on for very long. About a year ago, we tried to publish this very fast because the architectural progress was very fast, and there are 5 recommendations to make the Olympic Games one in which we have symbiosis with nature, and the buildings must be a model for the future. At least energy conservation law will become even more stringent. So 25%, 35%, or 50% less than what is provided for in the laws we felt were preferable. And we are said to be a country of energy conservation. In total, we have very little space where we can showcase affluence, and energy is such that in 2035, China will be consuming 9 times as much energy than ourselves. India and Southeast Asia consumes a lot of energy, and in these countries it's very hot. And to reduce energy in these hot areas is something that Japanese technology can do a lot for. By showcasing our technology, we could tell Singapore to stop keeping the temperature at 23 degrees centigrade. They are freezing, keeping the thermostat at 23 degrees centigrade. And maybe they should learn from us, and there would be some good out of it. And I was still in kindergarten during the Tokyo Olympic Games, and so I have no recollection. But elementary school, junior high school, and high school students will be impacted greatly through the Olympic Games. In the Olympic Village, if we create a sustainable residential facility, people will feel that they want to do the same. And the design and concept to be consistent is very important. The Olympic logo and mark will be unified, but people who make homestays in Tokyo, when they see that everything is unified, this will have a very favorable effect. And lastly, Japanese food is also wonderful. My friend came from Europe recently, and they come repeatedly. Once they come, they find that the food is very cheap and people are very nice and it's safe. And this, I hope, the outstanding nature of all of this, we hope, will be brought home to people when they come to Japan. And what has been mentioned since previously, we talk about hot Olympics. The games are also hot due to the enthusiasm, but it's really literally hot. In the previous Olympics in Tokyo, it took place on the 4th of October, but this time it'll take place in July on the 24th. So you can imagine it's very hot. It's extremely hot. And for various reasons, the Olympic Games were decided to be held on these dates. We have to do something. This is Tokyo and other regions included. The electricity peak, power peak, will come in July, August, and September. And at this peak, the facilities will and the people will be concentrated. How to resolve the problem is a very important problem indeed. And if we create a permanent facility, we have to hold this as legacy. So the hypotheses and things we have to work with to address this problem. And in any case, it'll be extremely steaming hot. And so how to make people comfortable in this environment is something that we have to give thought to. This is Japan's energy consumption for Japan as a whole. Since 1973, we haven't seen an increase in industry, but we've seen residential energy consumption increase by large amounts. From 1973, 2.1 times, 2.8-fold is the increase. It's maybe the area has become bigger, and we have nuclear families. That may be a contributing factor, but we have to create buildings that are close to zero energy buildings to renovate and to look more at low energy consumption buildings is what we have to do. The energy basic plan in Japan toward 2020 it says that public buildings will be zero energy buildings. There's a cabinet decision has been taken on this. To literally bring this down to zero is very hard, but high-rise buildings are such that we could reduce the consumption to about half of what it was, and we can bring in renewable energy. ZEB ready is what we call this. Zero energy building ready buildings is something that we could attempt to do, which is exactly what I am proposing. And energy is such that there is a very large issue related with this. Up until now, when we generated the power, we would transmit it and we would use it. And that was what we did in our lives. But we're finding that there's a shortage of power generation. Sometimes natural energy is sufficient, but in certain other times, especially in the holiday season in May, there may be a surplus of energy. Energy management, the demand response is what is required. The transition grid is something that we have to make smarter, and we have to make buildings smarter, and so that natural energy can be incorporated into the grid as much as possible. We need to do that kind of work, and if we can invest properly to do this, we can use natural energy more, and we won't be throwing away natural energy, which would be a pity. Buildings and houses will become smarter, and that is very important. And we've been talking about legacy, and I've made this diagram, although I may be going a bit overboard. People will be focusing in the Olympics. If there's a shortage of power, or if people can't watch television, it will be a problem. So reliability, disaster prevention will become very important. And maybe we could get away with using a little more energy. After the Olympic Games, the facilities will have to be used 20 to 30 years. So reliability, disaster preventive characteristics are very important, but environmental characteristics and reliability and power conservation is very important. This is just some food for thought to give you things to talk about. So I'd like to go more in depth as we conduct our panel discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was Mr. Tanabe. And lastly, from WWF, we have Executive Director, or Secretary General rather, Mr. Ryuji Tsutsui. He's a fresh Secretary General. He was working for a global appliance apparatus manufacturer. In emerging countries, he showed his very adeptness and skillfulness, and he has now assumed his present position. Thank you very much. Please look at this poster. I want to propose lifestyles for one planet. And you might question why an environmental NGO is coming here to talk about such a thing. The WWF is the World Wildlife Foundation. We started in 1961, and at that time we were about protecting wildlife. But now our name is Worldwide Fund for Nature, and the backdrop to this is that to protect the wildlife, the environment, natural environment must be protected. Otherwise, we can't achieve to do what we want to achieve. And biodiversity should be preserved. So we decided to take on the entire environmental issue. Our mission is to put a stop to the deterioration of the natural environment and to create a future where nature and mankind can live in harmony. And toward 2050, biodiversity, reducing the impact on the environment is what we're working on. The 2050 long-term objectives are the following. These are very important to preserve biodiversity and to manage that. And important wildlife, tiger and rhinoceros. There are these wildlife which are symbolic of nature being preserved. So these are symbols, these iconic symbols that we want to protect. Ecological footprint, to bring this to the year 2000 level. And that is what we advocate. As to why involve ourselves in the Olympic Games, these perspectives we want to introduce into the Olympic Games to bring about changes in society. In 2012 in London, One Planet Olympics was the theme, and so they worked on low sea and reduction of wastes and other things. And moving to 2016 Rio de Janeiro, Brazil is emphasizing sourcing marine resources and forestry resources. They have put forth very stringent targets. Transformer is what they call it. And with regard to Tokyo, we still have 5 years, or we could say we only have 5 years, I believe, in the latter. What does it mean, One Planet Olympic Games? We want to implement in the Olympic Games and to showcase this to the world. We want to showcase to the world that that being sustainable doesn't mean that we have to suffer. And so let me talk about the following, which is a summary of the overview of the sustainable world. Worldwide, 1.5 planet worth of resources is being used now. And eventually, the Earth will suffer from fatigue and will no longer be able to produce and reproduce. And what impacts this is the carbon footprint and CO2. We cannot control the increase in population. 3.1 billion was the population in 1961. 50 years from then, nobody dreamed that it would exceed 7 billion. So the population is increasing. And the industry, they all want to have better lives through the improvement of industry. And that's why there'll be an increase in ecological footprint. But if we leave things as is, our life will be unsustainable. So there are those who cannot speak up. Our children and our grandchildren, we will impact them. We will impose a huge burden on this generation. So we have to do something now. Japan has been working on this issue from an early stage. On the top right, you will see a chart which is the HDI index, Human Development Index, and the changes there. And the ecological footprint is shown here in addition. An ideal society is where HDI is very high and where the footprint is low. This dark part, this black part, that's the ideal. From 1980 in Japan, in 1990 and in year 2000, HDI, that is income and equality and education and so forth, we're seeing an improvement there. And from 2000 to 2008, we have reduced the ecological footprint. So this is an outstanding performance. But if you go to the bottom, if we look at the kind of lifestyles that we lead, the level is such that it's worth 2.3 planets. And that is the consumption per person and the lifestyle we are pursuing. And so this is the paradox that we have to solve. And we have to change our life pattern and lifestyle. Why do we find ourselves in our present situation? The largest factor is carbon footprint. CO2 emission compared to 1960, threefold is the increase. And food and food materials were dependent on overseas. And we've increased the footprint outside of Japan. And annually, 13.8 million tons. That's 2 times the food assistance that is being provided, which we are disposing. And this is something that we continue to do. Toward the Olympic Games, somehow within the next 5 years, sustainable management is something that we need to accelerate. And toward the World 2020 by communicating the Tokyo legacy to create a new society. And that is what I have in mind. Not only ourselves, but the government and those in the administration, businesses and the environmental businesses and the public as a whole must give consideration to this. Only then is this realizable. We made very bold proposals, a zero carbon plan by 2050 to totally depend on natural energy. This is an aggressive plan, and I will be going into detail on this later on. As been mentioned by the previous speaker, we have to reduce the power consumption by 1/2. And we want to develop natural energy sources. 1.6% to 2% of GDP investment is necessary, but we have to develop the natural energy so that in 2050 we're totally dependent only on natural energy and to manage through natural energy. And the other is food and goods sourcing strategy is something that we need to plan systematically and to implement. We will not be doing this, but a third-party certification system should be leveraged. The market and the consumption behavior should be changed, and supply chain should be changed. And by streamlining the laws, a better procurement strategy, companies that have better procurement strategies should be enabled to prosper, and we want to make changes in that direction. To wrap up, sustainable strategies. to formulate a strategy for sustainability is what we want to do, and we want to communicate. And we want to communicate the actual examples of superior and doable governance. And we want to make Japan one which can raise a voice to mention these things. And we want to monitor, realize social changes with the Olympic Games, and we want to monitor to make the practice take root. And the Olympic recommendation 4, Agenda 2020 recommendation 4, the point is this point is something that we want to anticipate and be proactive about. And what this mark stands for is the issues that we have given rise to is something we could definitely solve. Mankind can solve the problems that we gave rise to. And the ideals that we uphold, if we get serious about it, we can realize. So toward the Olympic Games, we hope that this spirit can live so that our ambitions can be materialized. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
So that was Mr. Tsutsui. All right, we will have this session moderated by Mr. Ono of our foundation. Thank you very much. I would be presiding over this panel discussion. Well, today, Mr. McCarthy explained how he did it in London. It was a fantastic lessons as well as the implementation. And then the panelists as well as the speakers mentioned what is needed in Tokyo. Larger framework was touched upon by the previous speakers. So the point is how to do it. And to do that, what are the challenges? So that is what we want to discuss in this panel discussion. Actually, Mr. Mizuno and Mr. Tsutsui, we have consulted as to the proceeding. So the moderator will find it very easy to select the themes and then following. But they said that it's not so interesting. It should be a free-flowing discussion. That will be more interesting. So Tsutsui-san, Mizuno-san, you said so. So I have no plans. I don't know what is going to come out of this panel discussion. But nevertheless, listening to the discussion, I have several salient points to sort out the discussion. The first point, sustainability, environment, very important. We want to have successful games so that we want to communicate the message to the rest of the world. Everybody is sharing that message. But it's not communicated well outside this conference room. I talk with many Olympic-related people. Sustainability, they understand, they say. Environment, important. But it's so costly, they say. It's expensive. So because it's costly, it's okay to have a so-so level. That's what I hear. So Olympic Games is the focus of attention. So we should not invite any criticisms and blame from the rest of the world. But you don't have to do that much. So, Shaun, Mr. McCarthy, I'd like to ask you, I'm sure that this kind of discussion took place in London. Sustainability, environment, it's costly. So it's not possible. I think there were people saying such things. How did you react to such comments, and how did you follow?
Thank you. I was frequently asked by the media when I did press interviews what was the cost of a sustainable games. And my answer was always, well, look, I'm really sorry I can't tell you because we never did a cost plan for an unsustainable one. For me, it's simply unthinkable to deliver a games without sustainability. But I think if you look at the example in my presentation of the velodrome, it's what's required is innovation and new thinking. I think by setting very high standards of sustainability and setting a budget that's realistic does actually require the participants in the games to innovate. So no, absolutely, sustainability should not cost more, and certainly does not cost more over life. If we look at some of the things that we've achieved in London, we delivered some great sustainable buildings, some sustainable infrastructure, all of that was paid for. The GDP now of East London is rising at 9% above the GDP rise in the rest of the UK. How is that expensive, please? It absolutely should not cost more when you consider some of these issues in the round.
ションさんありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Shaun. An outstanding example of London has been presented, so it's given us a lot of courage. I recall what Mr. Sueyoshi mentioned. This is possible in the world, but Japan is special. Japan is different. So I recall that. So based on this, we'd like to invite the panelists to make comments. The issue of cost and sustainability. Would anyone care to speak? They're all hesitating, so I'd like to call on Professor Tanabe because it's his field of expertise. First of all, Olympic facilities. Before I get into that, I'd like to talk about low C in Tokyo. In Tokyo, compared to any other city in Japan, the high-rise buildings are low C. CO2 reduction is mandatory. In other cities, people might shy away from doing this, but this is what makes Tokyo very attractive. A AAA building, 30% is the reduction in energy for these buildings, and they are given preference in terms of area to volume ratio. So a very energy-conserving type of building to reduce further is very difficult. So a top-level business establishment system, it's an early action system has been put in place. The early action system, when the building leverages this energy consumption, CO2 emission, they still, some of the buildings, reduce in the same amounts as those buildings which do not enjoy this profit. And in Tokyo, after year 2000, economic development and the CO2 emissions has been decoupled. So CO2 reduction has been achieved, but GDP goes up at the same time. So there's a decoupling. And with regard to the Olympic Games upcoming, ambitious high goals we should set for ourselves, and everyone should work toward these goals. It's very important. And the cost can be controlled somewhere. So if there's a lack of funds, you shouldn't give up just because you cannot meet the cost. You have to put up a vision first. And it's useless to talk about just the period during the Olympic Games. CO2 and energy consumption will be a subject of discussion 30 years, 50 years after the Olympic Games. So energy consumption and CO2 burden after the Olympic Games should be thought about. As important as how economically the facilities would be used. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanabe. Innovation is very important. In order to cause innovation, high level of standard and obligation is necessary. As you introduced, TMG has certain policies that could be introduced to Olympic Games. How about you, Mr. Mizuno? Together with Mr. Ono, we worked on the bid for 2016. That was what we started. But one trial was not good enough for winning the bid. So we tried again. Actually, we wanted to have a package of program 2016 and 2020 put together. Frequently, I'm asked the question, what is the level of contribution to economy? As Shaun mentioned, in fact, it's a ballpark figure. You don't know. But many things can be connected, and 3.9 trillion is the number that we came up with. It's a ballpark figure. It's a general figure. At that time, when we came up with the package, we had a slogan: "Is it okay, Japan?" Lost 2 decades. So economy was in doldrum at that time. We wanted to have the general plan of the Olympic Games. So expense cost 830 billion yen, and Tokyo will have 400 billion of games reserve fund. So that was the system we created. $4.5 billion. That was the usual expression we used abroad because the exchange rate was below 100 to a dollar, but now it's 120 yen to a dollar. So the bid was successful, and immediately after that, in many ways, economy turned for the favorable direction. Everything became more expensive. Construction materials, it's all exorbitant. The labor cost has gone up substantially. So in an instance, from the planning stage, situation changed completely. So economy is a living thing. In short, the environment surrounding us could change. Circumstances could change. Because of that, our assessment and our evaluation become different. That's what I felt. By the way, IOC is a flexible organization. In fact, during the game, someone mentioned during the game, in the case of 1964, it started from the 10th of October, opening ceremony. 2020, 24th of July until the 9th of August. How hot is it going to be? Just to imagine, maybe it is going to go beyond 40 degrees C. That's our imagining. IOC changes. When President Samaranchi presided, what would be the most profitable Olympic Games to host time-wise? There was a discussion. The vacation season of the world, and everybody can casually travel, and there are no major sporting events. There are various conditions, and if you multiply, then July, August would be the best time for profitable games in the world. That's why it's incorporated into the Olympic Charter. Olympic Charter, it's almost like a constitution. It was incorporated into the Charter. That's why the games timing cannot be moved. That could be moved. If that would be very good, we have to make a good case about changing the timing. Now, from President Jacques Roguet to German person Thomas Bach became the new president in last year. He is a very flexible person. Which professor I forgot? Agenda 2020, that was mentioned. Thomas Bach, he became the president, and upon the inauguration, IOC has to reform itself. Children are dissociating from sports. Doping is prevalent, and sports betting, fixing match, it's prevalent. It's a serious problem, so IOC has to change. Good Olympic Games have to be staged, especially the Winter Games. There are less and less candidate cities for Winter Games. It's indeed very serious. So Agenda 2020 program came up, and there are 40 items of proposals from Agenda 2020. In that, if it becomes expensive, games are not continuable. So let's have savings. You have the copy of Agenda 2020, the 40 items. Every single item would have the detailed explanation sheet. So these are the things that IOC will do. Proposals number 4 and number 5, 2 items out of 40, they are related to environment. Well, putting that aside, we shouldn't spend too much. That became the thinking of IOC. Exactly that was the timing when there was a problem of the change of venue by the Tokyo Organizing Committee, basketball venue accommodating 20,000 people, gymnasium. And then aside to that, the badminton venue would be created on Yumenoshima, but Saitama Arena and the Nishi Tokyo would be the new venues. So that was the change of the venue. Organizing committee didn't want to spend money. New things, new white elephants shouldn't be built. And to that, IOC said that it's okay to move the venue to Saitama Arena, Nishi Tokyo City. So you see, like this case shows, IOC thinking and organizing committees thinking coincided, a good match. So we are living animals. Situations do change. To the changes, we have to adapt ourselves. Otherwise, we can't go anywhere. Everybody is talking about money amount, how much it's going to cost. But the measuring by money amount is very difficult.
The measurement itself changes, although it's an issue of economics and cost. I told Mr. Mizuno to go in depth on these issues, but I would like to pursue this further. The IOC itself emphasizes the environment, and in the Olympic Charter, environment is a foremost pillar. In Agenda 2020, the environment issue is included. Those who take a cynical look would say it's because of the times. They feel they have to say this. IOC really isn't that serious about the environment. It's just the fashion of the times. And what is the true feelings of the committee?
The person in charge is really dead serious. From our position, together with UNEP, we always work. We walk in tandem. They are serious, so we are serious. So we work on various projects. But this time round, when we are on the receiving end, it sometimes becomes difficult to understand and follow the implementation plan. It's true. It's almost like the facade and the actual substance. We understand the facade, we understand the principle, but while I live, things cannot be done. You know, these are the things that people say. So environment will always take the back seat or the second fiddle. But we just don't have to allow that. How can we impact the environment in a favorable way? Sense of crisis. Sense of crisis. I'm full of sense of crisis. So sense of crisis has to be shown to the rest of the people so people can be aware and share the sense of crisis.
In terms of principle, this is mentioned. And so perhaps we could leverage this and to realize improvements. Mr. Tsutsui, you're executive director of JREF, but you're a businessman. So could you talk about the relationship between the economy and the environment, and what did we do about the rising cost? I was an appliance manufacturer. Mass production, mass consumption was the orientation. To sell to people who already have goods was something that I was involved in for 30 years. So in that, why am I going into the field of environment? I feel that there's something that's more valuable than money and value. And that is what I felt in business. In the past, in 5 countries, I have spent 22 years in doing work. And there are things that money can't buy. For example, bonds between parent and child, or faith. Or when you look at Japan, everything is measured using money. And that's a tendency, increasing tendency here in Japan. And that's the negative legacy, I believe, here in Japan. Before I came into this sector, I was involved in policy issues, proposing policies to government. And recently, international governance and rulemaking is what I was involved in. And the kind of society that we want to realize is one where sound lives are possible. Physical and mental health, sound physical and mental health is what we want to promote. What do we want to leave our children? When we think about these things, not everything is measurable in terms of money. And so feelings about the religion and faith and social codes. And in Europe, they're very good about making rules. They have set the very high targets in terms of rules. And the Europeans not necessarily achieve these goals, but they are working hard to achieve this. And they think it's all right if gradually they move in the right direction. Looking at Japanese businesses, they feel that as long as the rules are formulated, they have to abide and achieve these rules. Otherwise, they won't become players. And so the minute these rules are established, there are companies that can achieve, participate, and that cannot achieve. And that is what's happening here in Japan. And when we create rules here in Japan, we want to change so that we can put ourselves high hurdles, and then we can manage the Olympic Games with these high hurdles. And by so doing, if we can make an appeal that this would leave us with a positive legacy, this is something that's not measurable through money. But we need to calculate. We have to be fair, and we will have to be transparent. And having shown all of this, we have to persuade, and that's an attitude which is necessary on the part of the business as well as the Olympic organizing committee. And the people should not think of this as a burden. People should think of this as an investment for the future.
Thank you very much. From your experience, high standard and high standard rules will have to be used, and we have to think in long term. Mr. McCarthy, you listened to the discussion so far. You talked about the velodrome. And in the process of the developing velodrome, cost problem and the sustainability were combined in a great success. In your activities, the local people, local companies in London, stakeholders, you engaged with them. And also you engaged with IOC. You had all sorts of relationship with IOC. In terms of the relationship with IOC, what was the relationship that you had with IOC in realizing the Sustainable Olympic Games? Can you talk about your experience?
When we first started the Commission, I met with a representative of the IOC and we discussed at length the role of the Commission. And he was quite shocked, actually, and considered the Commission to be a threat. Because they were concerned that because we had so much power and freedom to say what we thought was right, that we might damage the reputation of the IOC. So the relationship started off rather badly. It improved over time. And I think the IOC did start to see the value in what we did. I would love to think that with a change of leadership that there are some changes and that the IOC are going to focus more on some of these issues. But I'd have to say my experience of London was that they didn't. I got kind of silent support, I suppose, from the IOC rather than anything particularly active. In my final report that we called Making a Difference, where we looked at, as I said in my presentation, you can't really call an Olympics sustainable unless you can have a legacy of changed behaviour. So we looked at how much of a difference the London Olympics had made to various different sectors. And in some sectors there was great success, so construction and catering, event management, we could see more sustainable behaviour. But some of the issues that you heard from Professor Yamamoto about ethical sportswear and ethical merchandise and some of these issues in the supply chain, I made recommendations for the IOC to actually take up that challenge, because one individual host city can't solve that. It requires a long-term relationship with the suppliers of this type of product and with the manufacturers of the product and their workforces. And, you know, we discovered in London that using a registration through SEDEX and audits, that basically didn't work. You know, undercover workers found all sorts of breaches of ethical principles. And I'd have to say that those recommendations have been completely ignored by the IOC and they've done nothing. So I would like to see a significantly more responsible behaviour from the IOC. I had a good relationship with them, but it was kind of a fairly passive relationship, and I would like to see the IOC being much more proactive, particularly in some of these long-term issues that one host city can't resolve.
I see, that's what it's about. Ever since I was with the Tokyo government, the things that I introduced in terms of agenda and the Olympic Charter, I said that because these exist, Tokyo must embark upon environmental issues. But this is a very passive stance. If we want to realize a sustainable Olympics, the most sustainable Olympics is something that has not been realized before. So IOC wouldn't understand this as a mindset. It's not because IOC tells you to do this that you have to do this. Tokyo has to go beyond the IOC in making proposals, and we have to tell the IOC to study, to do their homework. Maybe that's what it's about. Mizuno-san, do you have anything to say?
Well, maybe this is going to be rather rude comment or inappropriate comment. I hope that you will take care about recording. Now, Kansai housewives, ordinary women, middle-aged women, are not so easily deceived. You know, there is a telephone fraud. I am Kazuo, then the mother says. There is no Kazuo in my family. That's the response from Kansai, the Kansai mothers. If their taken something away. They are adamant about it. But Kansai mothers are positive about the redemption fraud. Such and such money will be redeemed. And then they are easily deceived. And they are so easily deceived. In other words, passive or active. It's the deep human psychology. It's the same thing with ecology. If something is there, then no, that's not my responsibility. Then we will have to craft something which will induce some good elements from the counterparty. If you do this, this will be good thing that will occur to you. This is a psychological proactive, that was the key word that Shaun said. So proactive means that everybody's leaning forward and wanting to take some part of it. That kind of methodology has to be taken. Otherwise, textbook would say this and that, and you will say this and that, and because of that, we should do this and that. Well, that won't work. I serve on the international committee of one organization. I go to the board meeting. International affairs, I don't understand. So you just do it. You just do it on our behalf. I have no complaints. You do it. We're not involved. I have no relevance to that. That's the usual reaction from the other board members. So environment could be that. Environment is so difficult, so I don't understand. So you do it on our behalf. That is the reason why the totality is not engaged. So if everybody gets involved, then it will be a power. Everybody leaning forward. I want to be a part of it. I wouldn't say redemption fraud, but the methodology has to be considered so that the other people can be engaged.
Thank you very much. To involve everyone. With that as a segue, we'd like to move to the next theme. We've had different statements about multi-stakeholder approaches. I think it's important to have multi-stakeholders. In the times that we live in, NGOs participating and various stakeholders participating, nobody will deny and reject that. But their true feelings are such that if it gets a little troublesome if we involve different people. So let's pretend that we're involving people and then be simple in putting together things. It's 5 years since before we have the Olympic Games. So if we involve too many people, we'll run out of time. And some people feel it's troublesome. We have some questions from the floor, so I'd like to include that in our discussions. A question to Shaun. Sustainable Olympics, in order to achieve that, the NGO and other stakeholders, exchanges of views are important with them. But at the early stage of the plan to exchange views, at a what's the merit of involving these NGOs and other entities at an early stage, the merit of this?
Okay, I think stakeholder engagement is very, very important, and the role of NGOs is important. I think my experience of working with NGOs is, in the main, I had a very good relationship with most of them. And I was able to kind of take on board their issues and then provide advice to the delivery bodies in a balanced way. Because I think we need to remember that NGOs have an agenda. They're campaigning organizations. That's what they're for. So nothing will ever be good enough for them. So there needs to be some judgment applied. I think also that you will find, as you get closer to the Games, that more and more NGOs will appear. Because they want to use the Olympics as a showcase for their cause, whatever it may be. So I think management of the relationships with those people is very important, to respect their opinions, but also to recognise that you'll never satisfy everybody. So I had all sorts of experiences with local NGOs that where I just wasn't possible to deal with, or indeed some global concerns. I had people from the United States and Canada come to see me, very concerned about the perceived behaviour of BP in the Gulf disaster, and also their involvement in the tar sands in Canada. And there were some heartrending stories, and I felt very sorry for these people. But what could I do? I was just doing one Olympics, you know. So I think there needs to be really strong judgment applied and respect on both sides when dealing with NGOs. early involvement is very important, and some of my discussions over the last few days tell me that we're kind of getting to the 11th hour with Tokyo to try and make really good sustainability plans, because decisions are made continuously from the time the bid is won until the closing ceremony. There will be decisions, but the opportunity to influence those decisions is always at a very early stage. So I think good, respectful and judgmental engagement with NGOs is fine and something that should be done, but recognise NGOs for what they are and the agenda that they have as well.
Thank you very much for that. Shaun mentioned earlier something which impressed me. People are focusing on Tokyo, but before that, in 2016, the Rio Olympic Games will take place, and after that, people will be focusing on Tokyo. That's what Shaun said. And worldwide, there'll be entities that we've never heard of engaging in discussions. The stakeholders in Tokyo perhaps are too optimistic at this point. They do not know what the issue is going to be forward. Mr. Tsutsui, you have been dealing with NGOs, and you yourself are part of an NGO. And I have changed my position as well, but Mr. Tsutsui has changed his position representing NGOs. So what would be your take on this? In the Japanese society, NPOs, NGOs are seen as being shady entities to a certain degree. And so NGOs, NPOs have their own causes as to why people look at them as with dubious eyes. We need to be very constructive and realistic. We should not be talking about ideals based on science and technology or biology. We have to make sound proposals. Otherwise, people will not be willing to listen. And those who have gone before us, our seniors, have taught us this lesson. We shouldn't just impose problems and say, take care of it. We should raise an issue, and we should propose means of dealing with these issues so that it's convincing. And we should look at examples throughout the world, not only examples in Japan. We have to have the proper findings and knowledge to deal with these issues.
Professor Tanabe from academia, you have spoken. On the other hand, you have come up with a proposal. You are not an NGO, but you have come up with the proposals from the construction point of view. Can you talk about it from broader perspective?
Earlier on, I talked about the following: individual technology ideas or ideas about reducing CO2 or containing cost. The people, the young people on the ground, on the floor, have these ideas. But this time, cost is an issue, and the delivery time is an issue. People are prevented from speaking because of this. We have to indicate a broad vision with logic, so that the people will be willing to speak up, and we will not be able to absorb these views. Perhaps this becomes close to what the NGOs have to do. We're right now planning for 2020. Before 2020, facilities and have to be in place and have to be built, and now is the time to start, and at a symposium such as this one, to present a broad vision, and we have to show that things are moving in the right direction. Quite recently, in the Olympic Village, a bid took place, and it was announced which business will undertake the village, and the specifications showed what to do about energy and so forth. But we need to speak up more in depth about these issues, and only then will things improve. And the young engineers and technicians, we have to be willing to listen. We have to encourage them to speak up, and that's close to the role of NGOs, I think. WWF, Lyon city development is what they're advising. So the role of assurance, I believe, is very important. Ms. No-san, on the relationship with NGOs, please.
Yes, just one illustration. In 1992, Earth Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And at that time, various countries wanting to cooperate, and they came up with Agenda 21. So looking toward 21st century, we will do in our organizations the environmental protection manuals. So everybody was hyped up and everybody was enthusiastic. In 1997, Kyoto Protocol was discussed in earnest, and cooperative incorporation sort of became apparent. Actually, from 1992, 20 years since then, 20 years have passed. So Rio Plus 20, let's have a Rio Plus 20 conference. And conference was held. I sound rough, but at that time, chairperson wasn't very smart. The country representatives, you shouldn't talk about national interest. You should speak about the Earth's interest. If he had spoken like that, discussion could have gone to a different direction. But it was just a free discussion, so every country's representative only spoke of his or her national interest. U.S. would say that within the country, industry is very strong. They exert the pressure, so we can't do anything about it. Chinese representative will say that we are a developing country. We are going to grow going forward. And then CO2 reduction, mitigation, reduction, not possible for us. 2030, we'll be able to consider the possible reduction. This must be off the record. So, small countries, developing nations, we are growing, we are trying to grow. How come you are going to put a brake on our growth engine? So these were the discussions we had, and the result was not so fruitful. So this time around, the stakeholders, or everybody in his or her own relationship, they shouldn't be mindful of their own interests. It doesn't end up in having the interests of the whole. So we have to consider the interests and benefits of the whole. What is that? And to that end, what can we do to that the holistic benefit? If we can cooperate, then we can go do something fantastic. As was said, it's a great, ambitious vision. Ethical Olympic Games, maybe that could be the case. So grand vision should be drawn, and then to that grand vision, what can we do from which we can render cooperation?
So to have a broad vision. And of course, since you're NGO, as Shaun mentioned, I'm an NGO as well, but they would not be satisfied, never be satisfied, but to have frank exchanges of views. And as Mr. Tanabe mentioned, you have to come up with different ideas. Of course, the organizing committee and the national government or the Tokyo government would be actually implementing, but all the solutions would not come about just through these three entities. And it's important that the implementing bodies understand this. And Shaun said that we're running out of time and a vision is necessary. And then I'd like to ask Shaun the following. In the case of London, 2005 was when Singapore IOC meeting took place, and it was decided that London would be the next venue. But sustainability plan, at which point was it completed? And to what extent were you advanced in terms of stages of a sustainability plan?
Yeah, the bid was won in July 2005. There was a sustainability manager in the bid team, and that person continued into the games in Lokog. The ODA were the organisation responsible for building the facilities, and they had to start recruiting immediately after the bid was won. One of the first 10 people recruited into the ODA was a head of sustainability. So at the same time, I was developing the commission and its protocols and ways of working and how it would work. So the timeline really was bid one in July 2005. I was formally appointed as chair of the commission in October 2006, but I was already deeply involved. The sustainability plan for London 2012 by then had already been developed. and I had a big input into that plan. It was actually formally announced by the Prime Minister of the UK in January 2007, but effectively it was complete by mid-2007. So within a year of the bid being won, there was a multi-agency sustainability plan available. And I think that was a very important factor to the success of London 2012, that plan was developed at a very early stage. Even so, some decisions had already been made. So, for instance, there was a decision about the energy centre, which was an outsourced arrangement. So Gaz de France built the energy centre and sold the energy. And that could have been specified more sustainably. It's very efficient tri-generation, but I think they could have gone further, maybe used biogas from waste for that particular facility. But it wasn't in the specifications, so therefore it wasn't in the bid, it wasn't in the contract. And immediately you try to go backwards to do these things, then the operator will go, whoa, I now have an unknown cost. I don't know what the cost of the biogas is. I don't know what its calorific value is. I don't know what the impact will be on the reliability of the engines. So I have a fixed income on the amount of energy I can generate and a price per kilowatt hour of that energy, but I have an unknown cost. So as a businessman, I have risk, and I don't like risk. So I'm not going to do it because it's not in the contract. So even though we established a plan at a very early stage, some decisions were made that could have been better had there been a plan even earlier still.
わかりました。
Understood. Even when you had the plan, there would be issues that crop up. 2005 July, it was the bid was won, and 2007 January, the plan was completed. So 1 year and 4 months. In the case of Tokyo, 2013 September was when the bid was won. It's been a year and a half. So at this point, our sustainability plan is not in place. So it's gives some reason for concern. I'm being a little conservative here, but it gives us some reason for concern. We're running out of time for a discussion, so we'd like to have the speaker speak in order. Professor Tanabe, Tokyo. It's been 5 years. It'll be 5 years since until the Olympic Games will take place. So, what do we need to succeed? It will take place in midsummer, and how to back up the energy is a very important issue. And recently, hydrogen is under very much focus. If the mass media here, hydrogen is very important and it's an interesting technology, but please write about other things as well. In the summertime, how to be sustainable and how we continue to live in the summertime sustainable. How do we generate? The energy management is very important. In houses and in buildings, people should learn to persevere a little bit, even if it's a little hot. And working in shifts is something that we have to think about. We have to plan now, otherwise we won't be able to materialize. Mizuno-san, please.
Fortunately or unfortunately? Or is it a misfortune and fortune? It is almost like a woven fabric. It will come alternately. In fact, 2005 in July in IOC session in Singapore, I was there, naturally, and announcement time came. And then all media was waiting in front of Paris team. The president said, London, everybody was stunned. And media had to run to the London team. It was like an avalanche, so much so, London wasn't sure about its own victory. Paris was absolutely sure that they will win. So full preparation had been in progress, but London had not been progressed to that extent. And on top of it, in the case of Tokyo, the moment we were awarded, somehow economy began to move. But in the case of London, since the bid was given, economy kept stagnant for some years. So it it may have been the fortunate thing because construction cost didn't go up. In the case of Tokyo, it's enormous. Construction materials go up, labor cost goes up. So both cases, which side is fortune or misfortune? I don't know. But the changes do happen. So what we need is to exhibit our creativity. We have to be creative. I said something very imprudent, but we have to have something which will make people lean forward. So we have to exercise our creativity to come up with the innovative plan. And ZEB, zero emission building. ZEB, that could be a notion. So it doesn't involve cost, I don't know, but so much so the emission will be reduced. So that's something that we can do. So the stakeholders will feel that it is so positive. So they will lean forward. So you see, we have to come up with innovative ideas which will make people lean forward. So we have to create such ideas. One idea, one example is with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs takes out the iPhone from his pocket and he says, I didn't make it, he said. I didn't make it. I just mobilized all the technologies available in the world, assembled it, and then I made this iPhone. In other words, in the whole world, there are so many elements which can be combined, which will produce something very interesting. So Tokyo 2020 will be based upon the creativity.
Thank you, Mr. Tsutsui. Ambitious targets to announce that and to find knowledge to realize this and to commit to that. That's very important for the central government as well as the administration. I wanted to go another round, but we only have 3 minutes remaining according to the instructions I got. Shaun, lastly, I'd like to ask you what is most important for Tokyo toward the 2020, the important message for Tokyo in implementing the Olympics?
Okay, thank you. Time is running out. You have 5 years. It will pass very, very quickly. And you will, once Rio is over, you'll find a lot of attention comes upon you. So as we've heard, there are some ambitious sustainability targets around, but there isn't a coherent plan. And you need one now. So that for me, there's a real urgency to develop a proper plan and a very clear statement of what a sustainable Tokyo 2020 will look like. I think Tokyo, as a developed country and one of the most advanced technological countries in the world, has an obligation to do this. I don't think it's a choice. But equally, as we've heard from other speakers, it's a massive opportunity to show what Japan can do. There are export opportunities, there are economic opportunities that it's not possible to calculate with a calculator. So it needs to be what we would say in English, a leap of faith. But the time is now, the opportunity is now, and I wish you every success.
Hi.
Thank you very much indeed. Initially, I was told to be very challenging, to challenge different statements. I don't know to what extent I was able to do that, but different leads and hints, I think, came about. And those who are here, we hope that every one of you would, in your capacity as stakeholders of the Olympics, will be found this discussion helpful. It will be very gratifying if you find this helpful, and we would like to continue our activities in our respective capacities. There are different keywords. Joint statement is something that we have prepared between WWF and ourselves. I'd like to introduce this later on. So we'd like to conclude the panel discussion at this point. Thank you very much, everyone.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Indeed. As Mr. Mizuno said, it was a discussion which made people lean forward, listening very proactively. I think you received a lot of hints and suggestions from the discussion. Again, a big round of applause to the panelists. Thank you very much.
どうぞご講談くださいませ。
Dear panelists, please come down from the stage to your seats. Mr. Tsutsui and Mr. Ono, please proceed here. Yes, up on the stage.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you, thank you.
それでは今大野さん。
Mr. Ono introduced the joint statement WWF Japan and Japan Renewable Energy Foundation formulated a joint statement entitled Beyond London, Onward to More Sustainable Olympics in Tokyo. So we would like to make this announcement. Please look at the screen. So two people have the documents. I have asked them to read it out, but because of the clarity of their utterance, I will read the statement. Number 1. In preparation for hosting the Games, we should establish a system and practical examples of sustainability management to minimize environmental impact. Accordingly, when the Games take place, sustainability management should be implemented nationwide as its legacy, creating the momentum for Japan's major transformation toward a sustainable society. These efforts should be disseminated globally as well. Number 2, by adopting the multi-stakeholder model, various stakeholders such as the organizing committee of the Games, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and the environmental NGOs should actively work on consensus building on the formulation of the policy, plan, and targets for sustainability. They should also cooperate on the measurement for the assurance of the progress and the dissemination of the outcomes for the success of sustainability management of the Games. Number 3, through the entire process from preparation and delivery of the Games to the legacy formation after the Games, we should promote the best use of renewable energy, smart consumption, the adoption of a sustainable procurement policy, biodiversity conservation, and environmental education, creating the momentum for raising awareness about the importance of sustainability among Japanese people. These are the 3 points of joint statement. Please come forward. Now, joint statement, we will hand out the copy of the joint statement. The English text is available. I hope that you will take one home. Now, sustainability. It's a simple word, but sounding difficult. So in a bold way, I want to paraphrase the word sustainability. For example, we want to eat fish as long as we want. In order to do that, we have to protect the natural environment, maritime natural environment, and maritime resources. And then we can have the certified mark, MSC and ASC. Let's select the seafood with those marks. In order to have the proper management of the forests and the good biodiversity, we should select products attached with the mark of FSC certified. Palm oil, it sounds rather strange, but palm oil is an indispensable ingredient for detergents and confectionaries and so forth. But we must confirm that our SPO mark, which certifies that these palm oil do not come from the forest, destroying the tropical forest. We should have a complete energy conservation so that natural energy should be utilized, which does not emit the GHG gas. Can you stand up? The members of the foundation and WWF Japan is a group of experts. These people were working as the receptionists and so forth, but actually they are the experts of their respective fields. We have people from corporations in attendance. I hope that you will approach these staff members of these two organizations so that the Tokyo Olympic Games could be a trigger for creating a sustainable society. Let's work together. So please feel free to contact these staff members. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the very end of the program. As Mr. Tsutsui said, actually, we are producing ecological footprint. According to the ecological footprint, we are going beyond the renewable scope of the earth. In other words, we are using resources which should belong to the future generations. This is not sustainable, especially Japan. If the world people live like Japanese, then we will need 2.3 times more the earth. So 2.3 Earths would be necessary. So Tokyo Olympic Games should be a game for one planet Olympic Games. So wishing for that, Mr. Ono and Mr. Tsutsui should throw this ball toward one planet Olympic Games. That was the wish of this ball planet throwing. Thank you very much.
では以上をもちましてシンポジウム終了させていただきます。最後までご参加くださいましてありがとうございました。